Hello, and welcome to a special edition of WMAR2 News. I'm Patrick Peet.
And I'm Mallory Safaste. This past year has truly been one for the history books. And tonight, we're shining a light on some of the history makers who are using their talents, passions, and knowledge to bridge the gap.
We begin with Paul Coates, a former member of the Black Panther Party, a current book publisher, printer, and so much more.
As a child, I certainly had a romance with books, and I certainly had a relationship with books. I'm one of those people that used to hook your school to go to the library and just stay in the library all day. I had a whole group of guys, a crew, and that's what we would do. It was more exciting being in the library and gaining information that way than it was to be in the classroom and doing the structured approach to education. And books early on allowed me to travel, allowed me to imagine, allowed me to see things that I didn't as a child, I didn't think I would ever be able to see.
Leaving school and joining the military, Coates was thrusted into a majority white environment, putting his blackness on full display. Reading the work of contemporary black authors expanded his worldview.
These writers opened up a world to me, and they opened up an understanding to me of the world that I live in. They opened up an understanding of black people and our presence here in this country and our presence before this country.
After leaving the military, Coates joined the Black Panther Party, fighting for racial equality, a battle that is still being fought today.
I think when you look at black struggle, period, there's going to be a constant. So I don't care if you're talking about the Black Panther Party of 50 years ago, or you're talking about Black Lives Matter today. Or if you talk about the radical black abolitionists of the past, there was this call for agency, for us to, be able to determine our own destiny, for us to be viewed and treated as human beings. When you think about the Black Panther Party, you think about the militancy of the Panther Party. So whenever you see the Panthers, there's a formation of Panthers. When you think about Black Lives Matter, it's the opposite. You just see masses of people, and it's decentralized, completely opposite. So on the one, you've got a very male or a very masculine type of energy going on with this, this military, this paramilitaristic thing that goes on with the Panthers. And then on the other side, you've got an organization that was largely founded by women, and it's got a Fenneman thing running through it. And in that organization, you've got so much power because there's a power of persuasion that appeals around the world.
When Coates left the Black Panther Party in the early 70s, there were still a number of people in jail that he had built relationships with. They had a desire to have impact in their community, and knew literature was the place to start.
Those people organized inside the jails, I organized outside the jails, and what we wanted to do is really bring an educational orientation to people who were coming into jails and people who were coming out. And we felt literature would be the best way of doing that. We had great examples. Malcolm X, of course, who had gone to jail and literally changed his life by devoting himself to reading and educating himself. We had examples of George Jackson, who had gone to jail and literally changed his life by just self-study.
That was the start of the George Jackson Prison Movement, the bookstore, and Black Classic Press.
It was actually brothers in jail who turned me on to books that were out of print. I knew most of the books that were in print, but every once in a while, somebody who had been in jail would come in and they would say, "Man, I'm trying to find this book." And I found a whole world of black books that had been done, black books, pamphlets, that had been done by those who came before us that had a mission And they understood similar to what I understood. So most all of the older books are directed at the consciousness of black people. I was fascinated by that. And with so many of those books out of print and unavailable in the early 70s, that's what I devoted Black Classic Press to. It'll be just like that. Yeah, and it's going to fold over just like that. Yeah.
Black Classic Press and BCP Digital is the only black-owned printing company in the United States. And it's right here in Baltimore.
It's like one of those things that is joyful and is pathetic at the same time. And inside of that, in the middle of that intersection between joyful and pathetic, is where I claim some value. It's joyful in the sense that I've been able to do it. And I've been able to do it not singularly at all. I've been able to do it with the help of my family. I've been able to do it with the help of individuals. It's pathetic on the other side that we would even be having a conversation about there only being one black book printing company in this country.
In his own private world, Coates is now focused on leaving the next generation as much knowledge as he can. As a father of 9 children, one of whom is the famed author Ta-Nehisi Coates, Paul says his children are the most tremendous experience he's ever had in life.
All of them were fortunate enough to go to college. All of them were fortunate enough to be exposed to the experience of college. Some of them went on to graduate school. They're engineers. They're all kinds of different things. Ta-Nehisi was the most difficult and the only one that didn't finish school, okay? But I think there was a similarity. Like, I preferred to spend time in the library. He preferred to spend time in the college classroom, but not be registered in the college. Like, I think Ta-Nehisi spent about 6 years at Howard. Like, he talks about how great Howard is and what have you. I think 4 of those years he was not registered. He would just show up for class. But it was the fun of learning. But it's hard talking about Ta-Nehisi without talking about the greatness of my other children. It's hard thinking about how Ta-Nehisi credits our community, and that is the community, his mother and my community, with giving him life and giving him who he is, because that community gave all of my children life. And it gave all of my children a sense of the black community, a worth of the black community, a fullness of the black community. One of the people in that community was a brother named Eddie Conway, who was incarcerated. Ta-Nehisi and all of my children used to go to the jail to visit Eddie Conway. A sense of value and a sense of worth, whereas most people wouldn't even think about it coming out of jail, came out of those visits. A lot of the articles that Ta-Nehisi writes on social justice now were shaped by the experience of those visits.
People have this idea, and please don't take this the wrong way, but they have this notion that black people went free in 1865 and then, everything was okay. In fact, what followed that was 100 years of, if not state sanctioned, the state certainly looking away, from a campaign of terrorism. So I am, for instance, myself, sitting here right now, only one generation removed from the generation of redlining. My mother grew up in segregated Baltimore. She lived in public housing. My grandmother had to get a contract loan. So the crime actually isn't as far away as we think.
He's gifted in the sense of interpreting the experiences that he had within our community, the value that those elders instilled in him. And the fortunate thing is, of course, he's proof perfect of my belief in the value of books, elevating people, giving them values, and for them to become contributors to their community. He's proof perfect of it. And one of the things that is very important as an institution, as a business, is that business be carried on. It be carried on to the next generation. Years ago, I began working with my son, Damani. I began working with Chris, fortunately, who took an interest in what we were doing in terms of the publishing and the printing. My work now is largely giving them support so that they have the guidance to fly this thing into the next generation. And that's what I'm looking for. You know, whatever I was supposed to do, I've done. It's not even a problem. It's done now. It's either done now or it ain't going to get done. The big thing is now how we guide this into the next generation.
After the break, we'll meet a U.S. Air Force Thunderbird whose dreams led her to fly high.
Proudly the first, but hopefully not the last. That's the motto of Captain Nelson, a history-making member of the United States Air Force Thunderbirds. Captain Rimoshe Nelson is a proud Georgian, Howard University alumna, and the first black woman to be a United States Air Force Thunderbird. As a young girl, she had no idea that she would one day inspire thousands.
I grew up in Douglasville, Georgia, which is west of Atlanta, come from very humble beginnings. And I just was very adventurous as a young girl. I had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up, but my mom and my biological father separated very early. And then when I was about 10 years old, my mom met my stepdad. And he was so different than anyone else in my family. And he had been in the Navy and traveled the world. He used to tell me all these amazing stories about just life and adventure. And all of his cool, like, military stories.
Along with those stories, she always found herself trying to get up and away to the clouds.
There was a tree that used to be outside of my apartment complex. And so whenever I would get in trouble or whatever, I just like would want to get away and get some like peace and to my 10-year-old self, right? I would climb up this tree and just sit there. That was really the place that kind of cultivated these ideas, and currently kind of like where I started to manifest, like that I would be somewhere else, that I would be flying high, that I would be, able to travel and see the world, go to 43 countries, right? So that's kind of where it all started. That coupled with those stories that my dad would tell me about him in the military.
When it was time to go to college, she knew she wanted to attend an HBCU that offered an ROTC program. She chose Howard University, soared in ROTC, and majored in speech communications.
I actually worked with soldiers who had experienced traumatic brain injury while they were serving overseas. And so before even me being in the military, understand what it's like to leave your family and not know that you may not come back home. And so when they come home, they may have experienced an injury, they cannot communicate. And so being able to help that individual say, I love you again to their wife, to their child, to their loved one, is something that I was really honored to be a part of.
9 years ago, when Nelson joined the Air Force, she learned the history of the Thunderbird squadron she would eventually join.
So the Thunderbirds is the Air Force's official aerial demonstration squadron. So we were established basically during the same time as the Korean War. And what we were looking to do is just to showcase the advances that the Air Force was making when it came to fighter jets and to demonstrate its capabilities. And so the Thunderbirds, our mission is to recruit, retain, and inspire. So we travel all around the United States doing about 60 demonstrations a year, going to 30 different locations, putting on aerial demonstrations. And we are just showing and representing what the Air Force is all about.
When a spot opened up on the highly selective team, she wasn't sure if she'd make the cut.
I doubted myself at first. I said, I don't know if I'm good enough to be on the team. I wasn't quite sure if they would accept someone like me. I had not seen a lot of people who had looked like me on the team. And so I was a bit nervous. I didn't know the statistics or anything like that. I just knew at the time, like what I had seen was not something that looked like me. And so it was a bit intimidating at first, but everyone was super encouraging. And then I went through the very tough interview and selection process and was able to be selected.
Captain Nelson puts her communication skills to use, serving as the team's public affairs officer.
I have the honor of not only being a Thunderbird, but really just training and prepping my pilots for all of our engagements, whether it's interacting with the media, whether it's speaking to a public, when it comes to any of our community outreach, going into schools, helping them really just tell their story and helping the team as a whole tell the Air Force story.
Her proudest moment as a Thunderbird has been giving hope to young kids and healthcare workers during the coronavirus pandemic.
We came up with an idea of working with the local Vegas community to fly over the hospitals to thank all of the healthcare workers who are on the front lines. And so not only to do that, but to give the kids who are out of school, who haven't been able to see their friends, to look out the window and just see a bit of hope and inspiration. We were able to go on the road and just travel to major cities and fly over hospitals and give the public, the American public, something to look forward to, a bit of entertainment, a bit of normalcy, and kind of be like this beacon of hope and light during a very, very tough time in our country.
Captain Nelson hopes to show young girls that they can fly as high as their minds can imagine.
I just happened to be the first African-American officer on this team, which is a very unique position for me overall, but also I think it's an opportunity to really just show young girls who look like me what they could actually become. And so my hope is that while I have been labeled a first, I won't be the last. Because I want to show young girls what the possibilities are out there, whether it's a leadership role, whether it's serving in the military, anything they want to do, they can become exactly that as long as they work hard and put their mind to it.
When we come back, we'll introduce you to a young entrepreneur who wants to do more than have a seat at the table. He wants to build his own table.
Larry Spriggs is the owner and CEO of WillConnex. He's making history in his field today, but he believes his industry is truly the future.
The hottest thing in right now mostly is pretty much off-road wheels, so everybody's going into...
From a teen, Larry was a big fan of basketball. Not just the NBA, but and1 in street ball. The love for the game led him to find his passion in life: cars.
I actually was lucky enough to get close and be able to hang out with a couple of the guys. And I used to ride around with them, and all of them had wheels on their cars. I can remember being in the back of their car and like they had the systems blasting. I would literally be trying to hold my ears and my heart at the same time because the music was just so loud. And that kind of is what drove my fascination for the cars. And as soon as I got to drive, I just knew I wanted to have a car and be able to hook it up.
He worked on his car so much that it got to a point where he had to decide if he should finish his degree at Morgan or follow his heart and finish his car.
I ended up leaving college just because I got a car. I started hooking it up. My car would get stuck in the shop. I needed money to get it out the shop, so I would start working. And then working became more of a priority to me, so I could hook up my car than going to school. I feel bad about it because knowing what I know now, I really wish I would have took advantage and really got the knowledge that you can only get from HBCU.
While he may have some regret about leaving work to finish his car, that work wasn't fulfilling. And he knew he was supposed to have a shop of his own.
When we look at our culture, we're the biggest influence for a lot of different products, and sometimes we don't realize that we have no ownership in these products at all at the higher levels. When you look at Wheels and Tires, a lot of the owners of these brands and these manufacturers, even the distributors, there's not too many black people, really any at all. So even when I started my wheel line, at first when I started, I thought I was the only black person or the first black person to ever start a wheel line. Nobody really has ever thought to go up the ownership chain and actually, instead of owning a shop and selling wheels to customers, to say, hey, I'm gonna fly to China and I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna get my own wheels manufactured and own the whole vertical supply chain.
Now his level of entrepreneurship doesn't stop there.
So my tech startup is called WillConnex, and basically what's happened is I've been in this industry so long that I've kind of seen certain inefficiencies that I believe that we can solve. One of those is if you come into my shop and you want to buy a set of wheels, I literally have to call 10 different distributors or hop on 10 different inventory sheets to be able to see what's out there. And I just think that's crazy. Like, it's 2021. It should be a more efficient way to do that. So we built a platform that connects dealers or retailers directly to the brands. So now you can go on this platform and see all of the inventory from every brand in the United States all in one place and place orders there. And we built this to empower the retailers.
Wheels may be a niche thing now, but Larry feels confident it'll be the way of the future.
And I say that because if you look at the way the world's going, electric cars are really going to be the way of the future within the next 30 or 40 years. Once we get to that point and there's more electric cars on the road than gasoline cars, the whole supply chain and everything from mechanic shops is pretty much going to disappear.
As his passion for wheels continues to grow, so does his passion for the startup world.
I think it's super important to have black ownership because that's the only way we get a seat at the table. And even saying seat at the table, I don't feel right about saying that because I don't think we need so much of a seat at the table, but having black ownership is the only way that we can actually build our own tables so that we don't have to look for a seat at the table anymore, that we have tables for each other to be able to pull our community up and sit them at.
Stay with us through the break as WMAR 2 News continues to celebrate Black History Month.
Since 1976, we've celebrated the contributions and triumphs of Black Americans during Black History Month.
Tonight, we learned about Black changemakers making history in our area.
We are inspired by their stories and fueled by their undeniable courage.
And before we go, we want to remind you to ask yourself, how will I bridge the gap?
Good night.